right to counsel, so I didn't know if you needed quorum to move on that, or would you just be able to?
We won't be able to vote on it until after we write it. So I'm comfortable letting the sense of the committee, the members present, decide whether we proceed to write a resolution to discuss next time.
And we have a draft if you want.
That's great.
Just to.
We'd be happy to look at your draft as we write and maybe use it if it's good.
Great.
We've done that before. If someone's already done the work, we're happy to use it.
Okay. I think it was submitted to the district manager, but I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we started, so we can begin when you want to.
Just for my information, is Abby on? Let me see. No, she's not showing as an attendee or as a panelist. I have notes from her on the first agenda item if I need them. Let me just bring those up before we start, folks, and then we'll get going. Brian, can we proceed?
Yes.
All right. Leave my wet glasses off. Right. All right, everyone. Welcome to the September 18th, 2023 meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Committee of Manhattan Community Board 6. My name is Rich Mintz, and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth and Community Coordinator Brian Lafferty. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law now requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Additionally, please remember that committee members attending virtually cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We don't have a minutes taker identified yet, do we?
No.
Well, we need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. Is anyone?
I'm happy to
Eric's...
do it, Rich, since I bailed out on the now sunny skies en route to the office. So
all right. Well,
yeah.
thank you,
I'm
Eric.
happy to do it.
We'll take minutes. We will now take attendance by roll call. I will conduct the roll call. I will call your name, committee members, and you will unmute yourselves when your name is called. Please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Michael Devereaux. Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Present. Oops. Nadine Kalani.
Present.
Abigail Cruzmar.
Present.
Sandra Leftoff. Richard Mintz, present.
Abby's on.
Oh, Abby's on, great. Did she? Oh, I see her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. Mary.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Are you Ralph or Rolf? Rolf. Okay. Well, I tried. And are you Miriam or Mariam?
Miriam.
Miriam Rolf. Okay. Livia Shrednick.
Present.
Present. Matthew Weintraub. Maura Wong. is not here. So we have 3 in person who count toward quorum. We have 3 on video who can vote in the event we need to, but do not count toward quorum. So we do not have quorum, but we do not need quorum to proceed with tonight's discussion. So we are going to proceed. And I'll just say as a start that this is our first in-person meeting in a long time. This is our first hybrid meeting ever. So we're going to try to keep this this month's meeting simple and brief, and cover the topics on the agenda and a couple of items of old business, but we are not going to drag it out today. And I say that in part because I am soaking wet and feeling the water dry off me as I go. So the agenda is up. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. And how do I see if people's hands are raised? I see no hands raised online. I see no hands raised in the room. So seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the April 17th and May 15th meetings were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the April 17th and May 15th meetings are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. Now some ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. So tonight's agenda, we have 2 topics, discussion of migrant family accommodations in our community district and citywide. And the second item is discussion of tenants' rights legislation in the 2023-2024 session. And in regard to tenants' rights legislation, we have a guest. And with the permission of the committee, I would like to swap the agenda items so that our guest can speak first. If anyone objects to that, will you please raise your physical hand or your Zoom hand? Nobody objects. So I guess I should just turn the microphone over to our guests. I don't know who is going to speak of the 2 of you. Alex, is it you? Because I see you're unmuted.
It's going to be Gregory Baggett, but
Okay,
I wanted to set the table and thank you guys.
Please do, Alex.
Thank you guys for inviting us. We have presented at other community boards in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and we are a coalition that believes in due process. As you can see from my T-shirt, it says, "Tenants don't let housing court violate your rights," which might sound a little shocking, but it is what's happening. And we had to create a T-shirt for it, and we're part of the coalition called Rights Council NYC. The reason it's called Rights Council NYC is because a law exists that was created in 2017. It's called Local Law 136, and it allows housing court to appoint a lawyer for income eligible tenants in the 5 boroughs only. And we have decided that it's a good idea to try to get statewide and a statewide equivalent of this, which we'll be talking about more. So thank you again. We have slides for you as well.
Are we going to be presenting the slides, or are they?
No, they should be able to share their screen.
Okay.
I guess I could share that. Let's see. I'll have to find it first. Sorry. Okay, I found them. So do I press anything special here?
Probably just share screen will work.
Yeah, share screen and then. you
Oh,
should
okay.
share window.
Yes, I see.
There we go. It's coming.
Oh,
There we
wonderful.
go.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Gregory.
So thank you very much, everyone, for inviting us, and especially to responding to our last minute request to meet. I think one of our coalition members reached out when they learned about your presentation today regarding tenant rights, and somebody wrote back this morning saying, sure, come and join the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation you're going to have after our presentation about other tenant legislation that's in the works. I just wanted to say thank you to the chair and the district managers and others, and particularly a note of gratitude to community board members all over the city, and particularly this group who volunteer their time to do a great deal of thankless work that in terms of managing the expectations in our communities. And I just want to let you know that I'm also very sympathetic to the work you've done over the COVID period, where I think we all experienced a sort of an uptick in community participation because the meetings were virtual. And now committees and boards have to figure out how to navigate this new normal of the hybrid with the in-person meeting. So, good luck with developing a new strategy moving forward. My name is Gregory Baggett, and I am a Right to Counsel Coalition member. I founded an organization in Central Harlem called the A. Philip Randolph Square Neighborhood Alliance, and we tend to work at the intersection of housing and open space in communities, neighborhoods in Central Harlem. I'm here to present the Right to Counsel on behalf of the Right to Counsel Coalition. A little bit about the coalition. We are a tenant-led coalition that was formed in 2024 with the goal to change how housing court operates, to prevent unneeded displacement and stop evictions that are unwarranted. The coalition consists of tenants, organizers, advocates, legal service providers, faith leaders, unions, as well as landlords, mostly small landlords who are also included in the legislation for representation when facing foreclosure. So after a 3-year group grassroots campaign that Alex mentioned earlier, the coalition won the right to counsel in New York City, making New York the first place in the country to establish a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction. So Alex, can you move to slide 3? Are we there yet? So after
Yes.
the historic victory in 2027, we launched a statewide campaign to transform courts across New York. And I'll just go off script a minute just to say, why are we doing this statewide campaign? The reason why statewide is important is mostly it's that it's a budget issue, that we need state money in order to make the law in New York City manageable. And so bringing other areas of the state into this campaign is important because in many cities, unlike New York, the housing courts are actually eviction machines. And in many counties, there are no such thing as housing court the courts that deal with housing are called eviction courts. So in this campaign, our priority legislation is statewide right to counsel, which is S 2721. And I was informed today that that number may have changed. And in the Assembly, A 1493. Alex, are those the right numbers?
They are the right numbers. CB 10 has the old numbers.
Oh, we have the old resolution. Okay, thank you. So statewide right to counsel was introduced by Senator Rachel May and Assembly Member Latoya Joyner, and it guarantees all tenants across New York State the right to a free lawyer when facing eviction. Slide 4.
Do we know where these legislators' home districts are?
Rachel May is in Syracuse, and
Okay.
Assemblymember Joyner is in the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So we're at slide 4. We're about to reach the end of our little brief presentation. So you might be wondering how New York residents would be affected by statewide right to counsel bill. We really need this bill, particularly in New York. Our local bill, known as Local Law 5754, is income capped, but the statewide bill would cover everyone. It would be universal. It would extend the right to a free lawyer to over 200,000 New Yorkers who currently don't have legal representation. Our local bill covers formal eviction proceedings when landlords sue tenants, but the statewide bill takes into account many ways landlords evict tenants outside of these proceedings, like illegal lockouts, failing to make repairs that often cause tenants to move, and other forms of harassment. The statewide bill covers any case where someone is at risk of unfair displacement. And finally, the statewide right to counsel bill mandates that courts notify tenants of this crucial right to have an attorney. It makes sure they have resources to connect with an attorney, and it mandates case adjournments until tenants have had time to consult and retain an attorney. Passing this law would address the current crisis in New York City, where courts are pushing through eviction cases so fast that tenants aren't able to consult with attorneys in a timely manner. In 2022, this happened to over 14,000 cases in New York City where tenants were eligible to right to counsel and ultimately didn't get an attorney. And tragically, this process is still going on. So thank you very much for listening. We probably could talk for another hour about right to counsel, but we will stop here and take some questions from the members.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk for a few minutes, and I have a few questions to start us off. The first one is, what happens in housing court when when someone is sued by a landlord and doesn't have an attorney? What is the result of that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And every Wednesday I'm in housing court, basically helping people avoid getting evicted by trying to give them as many tactics and strategies as possible to avoid moving a case forward that really should be adjourned because the people don't have attorneys. So the answer to your question is almost always people in holdover proceedings without attorneys are evicted, period. Just simply because they don't know what to do. And there's just so much that a judge can do to protect the tenant's interests without appearing to be unfair to the plaintiff. And the opposite of that is almost every holdover proceeding where a tenant has competent representation, the tenant manages to stay in their home. And most of these cases, evictions happen almost always because of some type of administrative procedure that the tenant was unaware of, that the judge is unable to do anything about, regardless how sympathetic they may be to the housing situation for that tenant.
You mean, for example, because the tenant agreed to a provision in the lease that permits them to be
Well,
evicted under
they
certain
may have
circumstances.
agreed to a stipulation that they may have, they may have agreed to a stipulation that has language in the stipulation that could cause them to be evicted if they don't follow through.
Mhm.
They simply don't know how to ask for an adjournment. I'll give you a basic example where even me, someone who's pretty knowledgeable about this process, we were trying to get a tenant an adjournment, and we were there, and the tenant, instead of allowing us to speak, spoke up for themselves and said to the judge, I need an adjournment because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what's going on, and I need time to talk to people to find out. Well, that's not a good excuse, the fact that you are inexperienced. The best excuse would have been, I have something to do on that day, like lawyers would do, so such that then the judge can't necessarily move a case forward. So the plaintiff simply responded, it's unfair for you to hold up a case because they're not ready and not experienced. That's unfair to me. And so the case actually moved to trial, when if the tenant would have just known that it would have just been easy to argue that they have a conflict in their schedule, they would have gotten the adjournment.
And if,
Can I just
go
say,
ahead.
that sounds insane to me. That somebody who admits that they don't know the laws and the rules and their experience, they can go on with their case. But somebody who just says, I have something to do on that day, the judge will say, okay, well, pick another date and not move forward with this case. That just sounds insane to me.
Well, I think that I want to be kind of, I don't want to be overzealous in my presentation. I think that judges have to be fair to both sides. Now, I'm not saying that the judge necessarily, push the tenant off the plank. The only thing that happened was that the case moved forward, and the next time there's going to be a meeting for that case, then there'll be another opportunity to negotiate. I don't think that the judge had any other option, because there were probably adjournments that were already given, right? And what's happening within the sort of the universe of right to counsel is that while we have a local law that says people deserve and should be represented in court, what we don't have is the budget to fulfill that capacity. So the legal service providers are overextended. And so what we're seeing as a kind of symptom of the problem is that organizations like mine, we're in court on Wednesday helping people avoid moving their case forward by helping them strategize around how to adjourn their case, with the hope that by the time they actually get to trial, their name will have moved up on the wait list, so that then they would have a competent attorney by then. I'm going to turn this over to Alex, because Alex actually has a more personal experience with this process, because he was facing an eviction and actually won his case.
Thanks to a right to counsel attorney. And so, yeah, full disclosure, I benefited from this program. I was an activist in 2021 before I had an eviction case. And then in October of 2022, I fell behind in rent by very little, just a month. And I thought really nothing of it because it was just a month. But then the predicate notices started to come in. And then I had to be dragged into court in December. And so I connected with a nonprofit that I volunteer with, housing conservation coordinators, and they have around, I guess, 12 or 13 attorneys who do eviction defense and other tenants' rights defense. And this lawyer was fabulous because I was able to prove that I paid the back rent. And it was just like a matter of waiting for like the time, the proof to come in. That was like a waiting game. And the lawyer was able to navigate a stipulation of settlement. And I really don't think that I could have succeeded without her. And I just want to say the golden years of Right to Counsel were after the intro, which was by current President Mark Levine, but back then he was a city council member, and his intro became local law 136, which became local law 54 when it was expanded to all zip codes during the pandemic. And that was August of 2017. So 2018 and 2019, what I like to call the golden years of Right to Counsel, things were beautiful. There were enough lawyers. People weren't getting denied. It was smooth sailing for those 2 years and the last half of 2017. But then the pandemic came, lots of people moved out, lawyers included, and we find ourselves now in this this mess where the judges are denying right to counsel for people in the 5 boroughs, which shouldn't happen. But because the courts are under the aegis of the state, there's a bit of a disconnect because the state doesn't really have to recognize a local law, crazy as it sounds. So hence this t-shirt. And yeah, but I benefited personally from Right to Counsel. I believe in it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a sense of the number of lawyers that would be required to support the right to counsel statewide, given the volume of eviction proceedings? Or do we know anything about the funding that would be provided as a result of the state law? It's really the same
Community
question.
board members always have the right and the toughest questions. I'm going to turn that one over to Alex because that requires some discussion about the proposed administration of the bill. Alex, you want to take that?
Yeah, for the statewide, and these numbers are being revisited, but well, first I should say that it's really a long-term vision that we have. We like to say 5 years, but deep down we think that it's going to be a 10-year vision to see full fruition. But we had earmarked $12.6 million for that viable lawyer pipeline, because anything less would or might result in the same New York City situation where the judges say, oh, your case has to move forward because there isn't a lawyer. So, but the 12.6, I believe, and we can definitely connect you to like senior staff in the coalition, but they have a better grasp of those numbers. But the last I heard, it was 12.6 million for to create a viable lawyer pipeline through an office that hasn't yet been created. And that requires separate funding. It's called the Office of Civil Representation, which is like the semi-quasi equivalent of what we have here in New York called the Office of Civil Justice, which is part of HRA.
So it will be a state office.
It will be.
Okay. And that leads to the question of where does the legislation stand? We have a question from a member of the community, Robert Strand, who asked about the status of the bill and what we can do to support it if we support it.
Well, it's a little contentious because Many of the legislators don't understand that it's a long-term vision. We don't want to keep asking for money year after year. Sometimes the pushback isn't even really pushback. It's more like, I would say, ignorance, for lack of a better word, because the law is often conflated, or our bill is often conflated with Miranda rights. So a lot of legislators, especially in the assembly, I'm not picking on them, but they say, we have that right to counsel. Haven't you ever heard of, if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be granted to you?
Yeah.
So we have it. And it's like, no, that applies to criminal court. That's called 18B public defenders. It's totally different. Like, what we are proposing is not that, because those are solo practitioners who answer the clarion call for public defenders. This program that we propose for the state is nonprofit based. So the lawyers would have really deep experience protecting tenants and a history of doing so. And so even in the assembly, and even with some senators, we have to say, no, that is, sorry, you're conflating Miranda rights with what we're proposing. They have nothing to do with each other. We do not have right to counsel statewide. And it's like, so sometimes the pushback isn't even pushback, it's just like assumptions.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions about this from members of the committee, either here or Stuart Dessert? I see your hand is up, but I don't know where you are.
Thanks, but I'm not a member of the committee, so I should give.
That's okay, because we have no other hands up, so we're happy to have you speak.
Okay, so just two quick questions. One is, do landlords ever or sometimes benefit when the tenant's represented? So, for instance, a tenant might be able to get a one-time grant to catch up on rent, and this could preclude an eviction. So do landlords sometimes actually appreciate that tenants have counsel? And I'll just pop my second question to you at the same time. The Legal Aid Society used to have what was called a housing help unit that was situated in some of the courthouses that had housing court. And a tenant could walk into the building unrepresented and find someone that day. Does that still exist, or anything like that still exist? Thanks.
I'll take the second part, but I'd like to bounce it over to Gregory for the landlords part. Landlords who appreciate.
So I think there needs to be a sort of raising of our consciousness as a community or as a city when it comes to understanding that this is not necessarily about creating a resource that benefits tenants versus landlords. It's about creating a fair and equitable court system, because I don't know if you ever go to court and watch how a pro se case proceeds. It is a shocking environment where essentially it's like the plaintiff and the judge is having a conversation where the other person is sitting there as if they're in a foreign country and can't understand any of the language. So it creates what I think is fairness in that both parties are then duly represented. And then the judges don't, and the court attorneys, and even the court officer doesn't have to fill in for the fact that a tenant is in their court without representation. I don't know that landlords see the value in that, but I know that small landlords who are in court facing foreclosure understand the value of having representation when they're in court about to lose their homes to banks.
We have something called Court Watch, which is, I guess, a subset of the coalition. We even have like a coordinator for that, newly hired. And so that, I guess, similar to scoping out tenants or being
So
sort of
we,
eavesdropping. Yes.
yeah, so we have Court Watch, which is an effort on the part of the coalition just to let people know they have this right to counsel, which is very important because you can only assert your right to counsel the first day you show up in court. In other words, if you show up the first day and don't mention you want to be determined whether you're eligible for right to counsel, you can't express that right if on the second appearance. So it must be done on the first appearance. So Court Watch is an attempt to get people aware that they have this right. The structure that you mentioned is still in the housing courts across the city. I think it's called Housing Court Ask. A group of people are sitting there with that can help people navigate what is going to happen to them on court that day. And that's a very valuable resource to have in court. And in addition to that, the court itself has set up an office where there are attorneys who basically do intake to determine whether or not the people who are coming before them on that first appearance are actually eligible for right to counsel.
Yes, that's called intake part, and I was able to skip it because I did phone intake with a nonprofit, which nowadays is a fruitless endeavor. However, with me, I got really lucky. I had volunteered with this nonprofit for a long time. So, but yeah, intake part and phone intake with a nonprofit are where the connections actually happen. Then you sign a retainer. But nowadays, phone intake, don't even bother. Go right to intake part.
So I agree with Alex, but I want to qualify what he means by a fruitless endeavor. And what that means is that most people who are going through intake do not end up with representation the way they might have during the golden years. But what they do get is useful legal information that then they can carry forward into their proceeding. That's part of what we do on Wednesday. We go in, we talk with attorneys who cannot represent the people, who are our clients, but they are providing us with information that we can use to navigate that day's hearing. So every appearance, it's sort of symptomatic. You're just trying to get through the day until you actually get a letter saying you have representation for that tenant.
Which might not come though.
Yeah. So, which is why we need legislation and funding.
Yeah, I'm not saying it will come because the folks are really over capacity. And I'm not sure what makes a case appealing to legal service providers. But I assume, that they have some measure of, what makes a case valuable for them to take on, and then what they hope people can manage with possibly their help in terms of information without representation.
Thank you. Abby, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you so much for presenting. I'm just curious if LSC funding is coming into this conversation at all. And if not, just like why LSC is not involved?
I don't know LSC, so I'll leave Alex. You do know LSC?
No, I think I'm conflating it with the local initiative support. Is that not it?
So, yeah, I'm an attorney, and I just know that legal services corporation funding is pretty prevalent among nonprofits. Like a lot of them structure their work around LSC funding. I just didn't know, how right to counsel and nonprofit LSC funding, interacted if at all. But okay, We need to take that one offline.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
I would love to have the conversation offline. I'm sure there's a answer. One of the things that I remember when I first joined the coalition, one of the proposals I had was, why don't we start reaching out to private attorneys who have lots of money for pro bono cases? And I was quick to learn that, having, an attorney who might deal in estates may not be the same. It might be a useful strategy, but it's not the most efficient kind of representation. So
It's like if you're going to traffic court, bring a lawyer who knows something about traffic court.
Yeah.
Don't bring a fancy lawyer.
Well, if you don't have any attorney, I'll take whoever is out there. I think something beats nothing, but I think in terms of the way the coalition is looking at this, I don't think they want to bring a kind of symptomatic approach. They want real solutions. So, and I don't know what is, what might be the conditions that are locked into this funding source that you're referring to. But I would love to find out more, and I suspect that Suzanne Blankley, who is the head of the coalition, and her partner, Katie, will have an answer, and I'd love to send back a response.
And for some reason,
That sounds great.
LSC rings a bell, like, because I attend so many coalition meetings, like, I think I've seen them in our coalition meetings, but we can definitely connect you to Susanna.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think just from a quick Google, it's federal funding for nonprofits. And I think we've been talking mostly about state funding, but it would be interested to see, if that could be a potential source.
Well, I just sent her a text, so hopefully she'll respond.
Thank you. So to move the agenda along, what we need to do is decide whether we want to prepare and consider a resolution in support of this legislation. And I guess I'll start by asking Abby, who is a lawyer, what she thinks we should do. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, I was just thinking about our full board meeting. I don't remember who, but somebody said that they were introducing a reso on increased funding for right to counsel. Was that Harvey Epstein?
Yeah, I think it was Harvey Epstein.
I think it would be good to maybe see if there's a text of that and maybe piggyback off that for a resolution.
So both support both any direct effort they're doing to add funding and this bill that would establish a statewide right as one issue.
Yeah,
was
I
he
also
talking about this specific legislation, do we think?
I think that's possible.
Okay.
I also just wanted to quickly add, from when I was in law school in 2020, 2021, I remember that right to counsel had not been rolled out yet citywide, and our speakers can probably speak to this more. But I would be interested to know and possibly advocate for, universal representation in all courts. I mean, I understand that obviously courts aren't meeting the capacity as they are now, but whether right to counsel is in every court or only certain courts.
So
for housing specifically.
It's funny that you bring up the universal word, because when the local law 136 was introduced, court had also applied their own name for it called universal access. And it was interesting because if you were over income by 80% AMI, you would still get, I think, 20 minutes of advice, and that like counted as access, which to me personally is crazy. But that was, I mean, it's still called, I've heard the judge say universal access when I was listening in. And so I went back to Susanna and I said, what is this universal access thing? She's like, oh, it's the same thing. It's just what the courts will call it, but none of us call it universal access. But I wanted to quickly say that to piggyback off of other resolutions and letters of support that already exist, I just want to say that Manhattan Community Board 10 has a resolution already done. And we got letters of support from CB5 and CB8. And I mentioned that because they're really close to you physically.
Yeah.
And also CB4 did a letter of support, and CB7 just last week did a letter of support, or they're drafting one because it's so recent. But, we let them see what others have said to just like make things easier.
I mean, what I would propose is that we look at that whole package and then prepare a resolution for consideration at our next meeting. We would not do a letter of support since this is coming through committee. We would actually do a resolution that would pass full board, would be presented to full board for passage. Abby, do you agree that that's the right process to follow?
I do. Yeah, I would be interested to see like the content of their resolutions, and maybe if we need to make anything specific to our district or specific to what we care about, we can go from there.
Okay. Is there any other comment on that from any members of the committee or members of the board who are here in the meeting? All right, well, it sounds like that's the right thing to do. Is there anyone who would like to take responsibility for becoming an expert on what other community boards are doing on this issue? If not, I can volunteer. But if there's someone else, happy to hand it to you. All right, I think it's me. I just nominated myself. All right, well, I want to thank our speakers. You've done a good job of explaining the issue to us and also answering questions in an informative and personable way. So thanks for making time on short notice. It's been terrific for us.
Thank you, CB6.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. And I did put a link to our resolution in the chat.
Okay. All right. Great. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but do not feel obligated. We're going to move on to our next agenda topic, which is discussion of housing for migrant arrivals in New York City. And I think, Abby, if you would like, I can just hand the microphone over to you to talk about this issue, since you're the one who did the research.
Sure. Can just cover it briefly, and then I think I'd really just like to hear what the committee would like to do with it, if anything, go from there. So just some research, just because it's been in the news so much, of where things stand and where there might be opportunities to advocate. So as of last week, there are 112,000 plus people in the DHS shelter system, which is my understanding of that statistic, including about 60,000 asylum seekers. Since like April of 2022, about 113,000 asylum seekers have come through government intake, city intake. The city has responded by opening sites, temporary sites, permanent sites, including sort of like humanitarian relief centers. And just to get a sense of the fast pace of this, just in the last 2 weeks, there's been more than 3,000 new arrivals who have come through intake. So obviously this is a really big, fast developing situation that is affecting the entire city, and not just our city, but many cities across the US. So as old members of this committee will know, and new members will soon come to find out, New York has a right to shelter mandate, which is basically a legal agreement that the city has that anyone who needs a bed is able to request and get one. As a general matter, we've seen news articles about, individuals who have chosen to sleep outside due to overcrowding and security concerns. But it's my understanding that as of this moment, Everyone who needs a bed in New York City has and will get one. It's just a matter of, fast changing circumstances around shelters and where they're located, and opening new ones, and retrofitting buildings to become temporary shelter. So I did a little research on just what is the different intake process for asylum seekers who come to DHS versus someone who is not an asylum seeker. And essentially DHS has instituted basically a revised intake process for clients who appear to be asylum seekers. It's available to anybody who at any site. There's no sort of one central intake point. And it seems to be a streamlined application that doesn't ask certain questions like previous addresses and things of that nature, because there's sort of trafficking concerns with this population. So it does seem to me like the city has taken significant steps to revamp and revise its intake process to accommodate this population and their unique needs. I think what's tricky for this population in particular is that asylum seekers are not eligible for subsidies under state law. So in normal DHS diversion tactics and strategies, they might look at whether someone could qualify for federal state subsidies to rent an apartment at their income level or things of that nature. But given their, legal status here, it's asylum seekers often don't have the same options as other members of the shelter population. It seems to me as of now that asylum seekers are housed in what's called HERCS, HERRCS, which is Humanitarian Emergency Response and Relief Centers that are being set up by the city. And these are being managed by the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation. The main intake centers are in Manhattan, but they're not in our districts. They're mainly in hotels on the west side near to the Port Authority and Penn Station. We do, however, have an asylum seeker resource navigation center in our district. It's at the Roosevelt Hotel on East 45th Street. I guess that's just sort of like general background I gathered. Happy to like add any more context or look into anything if anyone has any specific questions. But I think that overall DHS has done a specific, has put out a specific campaign of not tracking asylum seeker data individually, because they do look at it as, their mandate to provide shelter to anyone who needs it, regardless of status. So I'm not quite sure whether we want to do anything with this as a committee, other than maybe a show of support or looking more at the HERCS in our district, just because the asylum seeker, crisis and the crisis of, shelter in our city does sort of touch on DHS and DHS's mandate broadly. It's just a matter of, this being a unique population, there being, very many of them, and things changing so fast on the ground. But I would really like to hear what other things. Yeah.
And our DHS representatives who we've interacted with in the past, that's the Department of Homeless Services. They are very firm about the fact that they serve everyone with no regard to immigration status or anything else. That if people show up, they are entitled to be treated with dignity and to be given a safe place to sleep, as they're required to do by law. Well, I mean, are there any questions or comments from anyone on our committee about the issue? Eric, I see your hand is up.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks, Abby, for looking into this. I guess two questions. One was when you talked about maybe bringing something to the full board, just curious, like what the thought was behind that, or what the potential resolution might be. And then I just had one, well, in the world of lots of ideas, I don't know how good this one is, but just, I know looking for housing, to what extent, I know we've talked here in the past about there's some landlords who have rent stabilized units that they're reluctant to put back on the market because they need to invest to bring them up to standards or codes. Is there any outreach around private landlords who have housing available that the city, instead of paying for hotels, might be willing to look into that?
Just to your
And
second
there's,
point,
there's
when
probably
you
not an
say,
answer. Yeah, that's
yeah,
probably
when
not an
you
answer to
say
the second one, yeah.
private landlords, are you thinking like private institutions, like a university, for instance?
Yeah, I guess it was just this thought that they're keeping news reports that do well, I don't know the reality of it, but after the updated rent stabilization laws came into effect a couple of years ago, that there's landlords who aren't putting units back on the market when someone moves out because of the investment that they say they need to make to bring them back. So, and I forget the
They're
estimate.
warehousing empty units.
Sorry, there you go, Rich. The whole
Yeah.
warehousing issue. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just random thought on the warehousing piece. If there's availability, if the government's paying lots and lots of money for hotels and other locations, maybe there's some synergy there. But that's for another day. The first one really is, Abby, what were you thinking about for the board?
Sure. So in the last couple months, I think we've heard individuals in city government raise the possibility of right to shelter being challenged in court, or the city not having enough resources to keep up with right to shelter. And I do think if I were to introduce a resolution, it would be in staunch support of right to shelter, regardless of circumstances. The city mandates.
To be clear, right to shelter was established via a consent decree as a result of a constitutional lawsuit in which I believe, if I understand correctly, a judge was about to find that there was in fact a right to shelter in the New York State Constitution. So it isn't some radical lefty proposition that the city council passed. It arose out of a court case, right?
That's my understanding. It was a settlement that created right to shelter. And it's interesting in this research, I didn't realize that, other cities in the US don't have a right to shelter, other major cities. And, it is likely why New York does not see, mass tent encampments, in New York, is because of our right to shelter law. And I think, the role this committee could play would be to just affirm that, this is something that we believe in as a committee and as a city.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mike, your hand is up.
Thank you for the research. This situation is just, I think it's bigger than anyone thought I would ever get to. And I think now with people reaching out, probably to family members, if I'm putting myself in a situation, if I had a place to stay and it was better than the country I'm coming from, and there was these situations where my life was in danger or the living conditions weren't good, I'd be trying to contact all my friends and family to come here, and to come here to a safe place where I can make a new beginning. And I think that's what New York City is a place for new beginnings. I think a lot of us have grandparents, parents, or even ourselves have come from other countries, and that American dream to come here and to New York and to start a new life. I just feel that right now we're overwhelmed, and I hate to get attached to, it seems like our federal government's just not helping out, which is sad. We're taking everyone, and if our mayor was like the other mayors and governors, he would be sending them to Washington, D.C., to have the federal government deal with them then, but he's not. That's not what New Yorkers do, right? New Yorkers, help people in need, and that's what we're doing. It's just a little unfortunate that there's certain things that I've been hearing, like to get them working permits, could take care of 40% of them coming from one of the countries, I think it's Venezuela, could happen overnight. They could get jobs and things could get better. But I really don't know what's holding that up. The question I guess I have is, I know the Roosevelt Hotel, I believe, is not in our community board district, but are there any places in our district that are actually places for these people?
Well, there are hotel shelters, residences. I live across the street from one at the Marcel, which is somewhere around 200 rooms for families, migrant families with children. And it is.
That was one of the first, right?
It was one of the early ones. Yeah, it seems to be during COVID, it was a density reduction shelter for men, and then it was vacant, and then it became this. It seems to be stable, medium-term housing for people. People are not moving in and out constantly. The families that live with their children are enrolled in PS 116, like it's a regular residential place for them. I don't know if there are others.
The other
in
one's
our
the
district.
academy, right? The old academy they were housing people in.
The police academy was being used, I think, as a HERC, as Abby was saying, as a short-term humanitarian relief center. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Do we know whether it is, Abby?
I don't know. I was having a little bit of difficulty locating a list of HERCs, probably for privacy reasons, but I think that we could probably liaise with our city council people to find out that information.
I mean, if it is, there doesn't seem to be any disruption, because if there were, our community board office would hear about it, and none of our community board staff here in the room are raising their hands and saying,
yeah, like there's maybe one constituent who reached out to us about stuff related to the academy when this all started a few months ago, but unless there's anything I'm not aware of, Brian, we haven't exactly been flooded with emails.
all right.
About it.
Do we know how much it costs for like the hotel? How much they're charging for a family or?
We don't, but these are long-term contracts where they basically lease the, they pay someone to operate the whole thing. We'd have to like take the number and divide it up.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's a question with an answer. I just don't know what it is.
I just hope they're not price gouging like sometimes you hear.
I mean, it's, I'm sure that if there were apartments to lease for families, it would be cheaper to just lease the normal apartments, but.
That's like one of the facts I've heard, not to get off topic, but how some of these tenants who are being evicted, it actually would cost them more to put them into a shelter than to pay for their apartment
Yes,
for the year, which
that is definitely true.
yeah.
It's definitely true. Well, Abby, what do you think the next steps are here?
So I don't also bring back to full board. I don't know who made this suggestion, but every Wednesday there's a briefing from the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, Ann Williams. Isom. And that was actually extraordinarily helpful when I read through it today. So I think the committee should keep its eye on that. It's just late breaking, numbers of people and what the city is doing. Actually, on the federal piece, they do have a asylum legal screening that seems to be robust and growing. And there's actually 50 federal workers who are coming to help with efforts to screen individuals who are, staying here in New York. So
You mean
while
to
slow,
to take people who have come into the DHS system and evaluate their legal claims to asylum and the possibility of a case?
exactly. And it sounds like they're actually filing their I-589 asylum application and would file their work permits once they become eligible. They're also screening them for other options such as TPS, which I believe someone mentioned that would allow them to work immediately. So
That's temporary protected status for people in certain countries, coming from certain countries.
exactly. Mhm.
Okay.
So
Yes. Oh, go
it
ahead.
does seem like things are happening, but it's obviously not on the housing front. I just mentioned that to say that.
Yeah. Well,
um,
we do, within reason, have to confine our concerns here to housing, although we can certainly collaborate with other committees on broader issues. You had a comment, Mariam.
Maybe even a question. Last week I heard that there's a group of folks who've come into the country using that app that the government created, CB something.
CBP1.
And that folks who are Cuban, Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, and I think there might be one other country that qualifies them for parole status. And so if they come here on parole status, they can actually apply for work permit.
Right. This is what Eric was talking, what Mike was talking about.
Oh, this is what you're.
Yeah.
What?
Well, you were
It's
talking
not-
about how people from some countries might be able to get work permits.
Yeah, well, they're trying to get Venezuela. That
Yeah.
was the one they said they get it from that country, be 40% of the population that come into New York
Yeah,
City.
Yeah.
Harvey Epstein said that, but it's also Cubans and Nicaraguans. And so the issue is communication. I think they have maybe up to 1 year to apply for a work permit.
Okay.
And a lot of folks are past that and they were never told that they can do it. So what I've heard is that they received a text message recently saying you might be eligible to work if you came in with this parole status, but I have no idea what's happening. So I know like everyone keeps talking about work permits and getting rid of this, like a 6-month wait period. But then there's this other parole status that folks have been granted
Okay.
that a lot of people just don't know about. So I just want to put that in the radar.
What is parole? That just sounds like a bad
It's
thing.
awful.
No, it
It sounds like,
It's awful.
what it means is leave to stay in the country while
we
your
should
thing
change
is
that term.
being.
It sounds like
I agree.
parolees from different countries
Yeah.
are coming here
I
to.
agree.
Yeah.
When I was first trying to remember the word, I actually thought it was probation. And I was like,
No, that's worse.
really bad.
Probation might be better than parole though.
I guess.
Probation, the misdemeanors get probation, parole is usually hard.
New employees get probation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Abby, do you want to propose that we put a resolution in front of the board regarding our support of the right to shelter?
Yes, I would like that. So maybe, given our timing, we would vote on it in October and it would go in front in November.
It sounds like that's what we would have to do. Yeah.
Okay. I
Yes.
don't think right to shelter is going anywhere between now and then. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Mariam, you.
Do you know how many shelter beds are available in our district right now? Or is everything full?
Well, I mean, they're constantly turning over. Abby, did you get a bed count in the course of your research?
Of how many asylum seekers are in our district specifically?
No, how many beds are available in our district within the DHS system?
Oh, I don't know that.
I mean, we
Go ahead.
have a disproportionately high number compared to other community districts. That much I know. I believe that Brendan has a point of order.
Yeah, just to sort of explain further upon what Rich was saying. So, a couple of things. First of all, the reason Rich says we have a disproportionately high number of beds is because our district is home to the 30th Street Men's Shelter, which is the big intake for unhoused men in New York City. However, DHS does tend to be a bit tight-lipped for privacy reasons about the full extent of the number of people and exactly where in our district when it comes to people who are in their system.
Yeah, the point is not that they're being secret to us. The point is that they're protecting the privacy of the individuals.
Yeah,
Some of
especially
whom
against
have-
domestic violence.
Yeah, some of whom are being protected.
So we don't know how.
We don't know exactly how many. Yeah. So Abby, should we leave it in your hands to prepare a resolution on this topic? Since
Sure. And if anybody
you-
wants to email me with ideas, feel free.
you're going to have a busy month next month. For the information of the committee, I will not be chairing next month. I will miss the meeting because I will be on vacation. And so Abby you're going to hear a lot of Abby next month. All right, well, is that enough for this topic for now? Any of, oh.
Yes, I just want to note that there's a question in the chat about the status of the hotel on 39th and Lex. I believe we discussed this in like March or April.
Yeah, I have not heard an update on that. And I don't think anything has happened. We should probably see if the office can get any information. I'm looking at the office. The office is nodding. So we'll see what we can find out. Thank you.
And also I just want to note there's a question of what shelters in our community board need. Not sure the best place to send.
Yeah, does our office know whether anyone is collecting supplies or organizing supply collection? I mean, I know we're going into the holidays, in the winter, so coats will definitely be needed, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't know about specific to our district, but I know the mayor's office has been pushing, or at least had been pushing, like ways to help refugees, you know, in terms of things like supplies and the like that that we've been advertising in our newsletters.
Okay, great.
But as to the specifics, I would need to look back at that.
Yeah.
There's not in the district, but there's the Little Shop of Kindness. That's the free store for asylum seekers and migrants right by Bryant Park.
Oh.
And they have a registry and they're taking donations.
Is that a physical location?
It is, and I volunteer there about twice a week. It's a great place.
Where is it?
It's inside a church,
Right by Bryant Park.
between 40th, no, it's on 40th between 5th and 6th.
Okay.
Across the street from Bryant Park. Little Shop of Kindness, they accept donations, not stuff that you loved, that you wore a lot, and it has like, you know, holes and stains.
Yeah,
like
but
stuff
usable.
Gently used.
Yes.
They also take, you know, diapers, pads. It's a great place.
Okay.
And I think they have a registry and they do accept money.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Little Shop of Kindness.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before we move on to the final agenda item, Gregory, I see your hand is up. If there are any comments you wanted to make on this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much for your leadership on this issue, Abby. I just wanted to comment on an area around right to shelter that is currently being challenged, and that is this notion of whether or not the intent of right to shelter include contingencies like emergencies like we're currently facing. And there is opposition growing around trying to narrow the scope of the outcome of the Callahan versus Carey case. So that could be something you could address, because that implicitly that's what the mayor is asking. And I think just last week there was an op-ed from former Mayor Bloomberg that stated explicitly that right to shelter did not include contingent emergency situations like this current crisis involving asylum seekers.
So that might be something to consider pushing back against in a resolution, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who participated in this part of the discussion, and I'm going to move on to the final agenda item, which is old and new business. And I'm just going to raise one item of business myself, which is that we need to nail down our budget requests for this year, which is something that last year we started early, and this year we are doing it the last minute. I apologize for that. For those who are new, every year the community board ranks its budget priorities in a submission that we make to the city. In that way, we can possibly influence the incremental direction of city funds. Sometimes we get concrete things achieved, like we got security doors installed in one of our NYCHA properties by asking for it 3 years in a row. We finally got a city council member to put up the money, and that got solved. Typically, our committee's priorities, which get mushed together with everyone else's for the submission, are things like more supportive housing. I don't anticipate they will change significantly. I think what I'm planning to do is to do the same thing I did last year, which is to take last year's sheet, put together a proposed re-ranking, which will probably not be that different, and run it by the members of the committee in email to see if you have any comments. I see you nodding. You're involved in this directly from the other side.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about it?
No, but you covered the main things. Like, it's just like getting those in like a timely manner, because it's all on the budget committee. And we do just want to be able to collate them together. To Rich's point, like, they don't change year to year, but it is worth being thoughtful, because sometimes you get responses, people do read them. So it is just worth spending the time to make sure
To see what responses we got last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think it's all in the Airtable.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any comments about budget requests? Questions? Members of the committee, and is there anything else in the Q&A that I missed? There is not.
Can I new business?
Please.
Budget.
Yeah, no, new business
All
fine.
right, well, two things, and it's kind of new old business. One is 14th Street. And I want to talk to this committee. 14th Street, and I don't know how, like, it's been talked about in other committees, has become, since the pandemic, just, let's just say, a lot worse than before the pandemic. There's been street vendors, illegal street vendors, there's been a lot of crime, there's been a lot of drug use. This morning on 14th today, right in basically rush hour, there was people shooting up in the subway station. But I guess this committee, homelessness, I've noticed a couple new like homeless camps coming up on 14th Street or First Avenue and Beth Israel. Has there been any reach out to community board about this? Has there been any, resources sent over there for homelessness? What is it? NYPD has their department, right? What is it? Homeless services, or is it sent over there?
And we have outreach teams that typically work around Bellevue. But they, I assume that they are active over there, but I don't actually know. It's something that we should look up.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything in a while, although. But I have noticed this when I've been in the area. Is this on the north side or the south side of the street, or both sides?
Well, it's both. So I know our council members, Carolina and Keith, have both been working on this, and it seems like it's a cycle where the 9th and 13th precinct, because the south side is the 9th precinct, the north side is the 13th precinct, come, they sit there in their cars, and then they sit there for a little bit, maybe a couple of days or whatever, and they go away and everything comes back, It'd be nice to have a couple beat police officers actually walking in the street.
Yeah.
But, I just want to focus on the homelessness aspect, since that's what this committee is, of getting some maybe services out there to reach out to them and see if we can maybe get some housing, or, because there's about 3 places, one right near the M14 bus where there's a huge, encampment.
Between 3rd and 2nd.
No, First Avenue. Right now for First
and
M15, right near the M15.
Yeah.
On First Avenue and 14th Street, where it's just popped up, so maybe if we can get some services out there to check on them. And, we're starting to get to the fall, winter months, and these are the tough.
It's probably time for me to have a conversation with the people involved in the outreach teams that service the area, because I haven't talked to them in a year. So if you all in the office know who I should contact, let me know and I can make a call.
Yeah, and broadly speaking, we'll work on the homelessness issue in that particular area.
Great, perfect.
Thank you.
The other order of new business is, and it's just a question about the in-person meetings.
Yeah.
Is there any talks about having committee meetings being Zoom and full board meetings being in person?
I think we aren't allowed to do that unless there's a change in state law. But I also think we would be delighted if there were a change in state law that would make that possible.
I've been advocating for a change in state law. We passed a resolution on it last year.
And
Yeah.
who in the state do we have to because it's just,
The assembly, what happened was after we were allowed to meet virtually as a result of the COVID emergency order. And the governor's COVID emergency order was extended, but not extended indefinitely, and it expired. And when it expired, the state legislature passed a new set of policies as to how public meetings could be conducted virtually or in a hybrid manner, but they were not sufficient to enable all of the ways in which we realistically need to conduct meetings. I think our legislators understand that there needs to be a revision to the law. Harvey Epstein certainly seems amenable, but we have to push that through. I don't know what the process is for us to advocate for that.
could there be a city law that just like takes part in just community boards?
We can't supersede state law on open meetings.
Yeah, the open meetings law is a state law, so that's the challenge. So it would really probably need to be something at the state level.
Yeah, our hands are tied as a city. But I agree with you. It would be very nice to do more of these meetings virtually. And honestly, we get more public participation when meetings are virtual. So, but noted, and I'll talk to Kyle about the fact that you raised this. He'll be happy to hear.
I think it should be. I
internal
think it
pressure.
should be all. I'm sure the borough president's office could help us still with something. if we all, maybe we should just have a sit out. Good old fashioned call out of community boards.
Yeah,
but just my opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Is there any other old or new business that anyone would like to raise before we adjourn the meeting? The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn from any member of the committee.
Motion adjourn.
All right. And as a motion to adjourn does not require a second, this meeting is hereby adjourned at 7:54 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for your enthusiastic participation. So we're now off video. Oh.